If someone had told me that a bully reading my diary out loud, exposing my crush on the college heartthrob would somehow lead to me dating her, I would have cried in disbelief. The world for Arya was a library, not just the actual brick and mortar building where she spent most of her waking hours, nestled in the hushed Caroline silence of the third floor, but a metaphysical one. People were books. Some were flashy bestsellers with glossy covers and empty pages. Others were dense, impenetrable academic texts. Most she found were merely pamphlets. But then there was Camila. Camila was not a book. She was an entire enchanted library all to herself. Arya first saw her during freshman orientation, a beacon of golden light and effortless grace in a sea of anxious, sweating newcomers. She wasn't just pretty. She was a composition. Sun-kissed hair that fell in soft waves, eyes the color of a sun-drenched ocean, a laugh that sounded like the first clear note of a perfect melody. She moved with an athlete's confidence and a dancer's grace, and everyone noticed. Arya noticed from her safe distance. Her arms clutched around a stack of required reading, her own dark practical bob and thick rhymed glasses feeling like a shield against such radiant energy. She was a creature of footnotes and marginalia, and Camila was the main event. Weeks turned into months, and the silent, distant admiration curdled into a profound and secret ache. It was more than a crush. It was a foundational reordering of Arya's universe. Camila became her personal sun, and Arya, a quiet planet in a distant orbit, found her entire axis tilted toward that warmth. Her diary became her confessional. It was a simple leather-bound journal, its pages filled not with homework equations, but with the sacred, cringe-worthy poetry of her longing. October 12th. Saw her laughing by the oak tree today. Her head was thrown back, and the sun caught her hair just so. It's a cliché, I know, to compare someone to the sun. But what do you do when it's true? When their absence makes the world feel cloudy and dim. November 3rd. We made eye contact in Philosophy 101. She sits 3 rows ahead and 2 seats to the left. My perfect diagonal. She dropped her pen and I nearly had a heart attack. She smiled. A small, polite, meaningless smile of acknowledgement. My lungs forgot how to work. If oxygen is what keeps us alive, then the sight of her is my particular brand of air. I don't breathe air. I breathe the possibility of her. This was her oxygen metaphor. To Arya, every breath without Camilla's presence was just a mechanical process, a dull necessity. But a glimpse, a smile, a shared moment in a crowded hallway that was a gasp of pure life-giving oxygen. It was this intensity that made everyone else seem like a mannequin. Boys from her literature seminar asked her out, fumbling through invitations for coffee. A girl from the campus newspaper complimented her articles and shyly suggested getting a drink. Arya politely, firmly rejected them all. They were handsome. They were smart. They were kind. But they were inert plastic. They were storefront dummies dressed in the costumes of potential partners. But they had no heartbeat, no soul. How could they win her every thought, every fantasy, every quiet hope was monopolized by a single, blindingly bright blonde? The campus rumor mill churned constantly about Camila. Who was she dating? Who was she going to date? The star quarterback, the brooding art student, the rich legacy from the business fraternity. The answers were always the same. No one. Camila was famously, perplexingly single. Whispers followed her that she was picky, that she was waiting for something specific, that she believed truly and earnestly in a singular, epic, once-in-a-lifetime love. This only made Arya's devotion more fervent and more hopeless. Of course, Camila was waiting for a soulmate. And of course, that soulmate would be her equal. Another stunning, popular, perfect specimen of humanity. Not a bookish girl who could name every character in Tolstoy's novels, but couldn't manage to say hello without tripping over her own feet. Yet, Camila was kind. This was the most beautiful and the most tortuous part of it all. She wasn't a cruel queen bee. Her popularity wasn't built on exclusion. She remembered names. She held doors and she often smiled at Arya. In the library once, Arya was desperately searching for specific criticism on Wuthering Heights. Her fingers stumbling over the spines on a high shelf. A warm presence appeared beside her, and a long, graceful arm reached up effortlessly to pluck the very book she needed from its perch. "This one?" Camilla asked, her voice a melody. She handed it over, her smile genuine and unassuming. "Tough assignment. Professor Hart doesn't mess around." Arya's tongue had become a useless piece of leather. Her heart was a frantic bird beating against the cage of her ribs. She managed a jerky nod, her glasses slipping down her nose. Camilla's smile widened, a tiny charming crinkle appearing at the corner of her eye. "Good luck." She walked away, leaving Arya clutching the book, her skin buzzing where their fingers had almost touched. She spent the next hour staring at the same page, not reading a single word, replaying the moment on a loop. She built entire castles in the air from those 3 sentences. But then the inevitable collapse. "She's just nice. She's like that too. Everyone. She probably pies you." The clumsy girl with the glasses. So Arya retreated back to the pages of her diary, the only place where her love was real and unchallenged. She is the only thing that feels real. Everyone else is a mannequin, going through the motions of life. But she is life. She is everything, and I am a shadow in the corner, content to watch her shine. Even if it means I never feel the warmth directly. She closed the book, locking her heart away inside it, never imagining that the lock would soon be broken, and her secret world would be spilled into the blinding light of day for everyone to see. Part 2. The Diary Humiliation. The cafeteria was a symphony of controlled chaos. A familiar den of clattering trays, shouted greetings, and the low hum of 100 simultaneous conversations. For Arya, it was background noise to her solitary ritual. Tucked at a small table in the corner, a fortress of books stacked neatly beside her. She was perfectly content, invisible in her little world. She was rereading her notes for an afternoon seminar, a half-eaten apple forgotten on her tray. The first prickle of knees was the shadow that fell across her page. She looked up, expecting a lost freshman asking for directions. Instead, she found Troy, one of the hulking, perpetually smirking members of the lacrosse team, flanked by Brielle and Naomi, 2 of Camilla's orbiting friends, known more for their sharp fashion and sharper tongues than their kindness. "What's this?" Troy asked, his voice a lazy drawl. Before Arya could process his intention, his meaty hand closed not around her tray, but around the worn leather-bound journal she had momentarily set aside. While she organized her notes, her heart stopped. Ice water flooded her veins. "That's private," she said, her voice a thin, reedy thing she barely recognized. She reached for it, a desperate, fluttering motion. Brielle, with a laugh like shattering glass, snatched it from Troy's grasp. "Oh my God! Is this a diary? Does the little bookworm have secrets? Give it back, please." There was a whisper, a plea that already knew it would be denied. The comfortable noise of the cafeteria seemed to recede, replaced by a high-pitched ringing. In her ears, her personal sanctuary, her soul-made paper, was in the hands of vandals. Naomi peered over Brielle's shoulder as she opened it. "Wait, is that oh? This is too good." Her eyes, cold and calculating, scanned a page, and then flicked up to meet Arya's, wide with mock sympathy. "Oh, Arya, you poor thing." A few people at nearby tables were starting to look over, sensing a disruption in the usual lunchtime rhythm. "Read it," Troy urged, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Let's hear what the genius writes about." "No, don't." Arya stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the linoleum floor. But it was too late. Real pining for her growing audience cleared her throat theatrically, and then it began. The desecration. September 18th. Brielle read, her voice dripping with false dramatic flair. "I saw her today on the quad. She was wearing a blue sweater the exact color of the sky. When she laughs, it's like hearing a song you've been trying to remember your whole life. Who's she? Arya. Got a little crush. Laughter erupted from their little circle. Arya felt the heat of 1,000 suns on her face. She was trapped, paralyzed. A specimen pinned to a board. Naomi snatched the book, finding another entry. Oxygen, she read, her voice laced with scorn. That's what she is. My oxygen. Everyone else is just mannequins empty. But she's so real it hurts. I think if she ever truly looked at me, I'd forget how to breathe. Mannequins. Oxygen. Seriously. The laughter grew louder, more pervasive. It wasn't just Troy and the girls now. It was the entire section of the cafeteria. People were turning in their seats. Phones were being subtly raised. Arya's most intimate thoughts, her poetic, desperate love, were being served up as lunchtime entertainment. Each word was a lash, each giggle a needle. The world narrowed to the sound of her own heart shattering. She wrapped her arms around herself, wishing she could vanish, dissolve into the air she'd so foolishly written about. Tears, hot and shameful, began to carve paths through her burning cheeks. She hid her face in her hands, her entire body trembling. It was at this moment, at the absolute peak of her humiliation, that a new voice cut through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, clear, and crackling with an anger so potent it silenced the laughter instantly. What the hell do you think you're doing? All heads turned. Camila stood at the edge of the crowd, her tray forgotten on a nearby table. Her beautiful face, usually a mask of easygoing charm, was transformed. Her jaw was set, her eyes narrowed into furious slits fixed on Brielle and Naomi. The crowd parted for her as she strode forward, a blonde avenger in a college sweatshirt. Brielle, momentarily stunned, tried to laugh it off. Cam, you won't believe this. The library mouse is writing love poems about. I said, Camila repeated, her voice low and dangerous. What are you doing? She ripped the diary from Brielle's hands, clutching it to her chest protectively. Her gaze swept over her so-called friends, and the look on her face was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. You think this is funny, stealing someone's private thoughts, humiliating them for a laugh. It was just a joke, Troy mumbled, suddenly finding the floor very interesting. It's cruelty, Camila spat. The entire cafeteria was dead silent, every single person hanging on her every word. She looked at Arya, who was still trying to make herself disappear, and her expression softened for a fraction of a second, filled with a pain that mirrored Arya's own. Then she turned back to the crowd, her voice rising, not in a shout, but in a clear, unwavering declaration that carried to every corner of the room. You want to know what I think? She said, her eyes locking with Arya's tear-filled ones. I think it's the bravest, most beautiful thing I've ever heard. A single, shared gasp shivered across the room. Arya's head snapped up, disbelief slicing through her humiliation. Camila kept going, her voice gathering power. I'm thankful they did this. I'm glad they grabbed it and read it, because now I know. She stepped toward Arya, her expression utterly sincere, utterly fierce. It means I've found her. She turned her anger back on Brielle and Naomi. And you two, you're not my friends. Friends don't do this. We're done. The finality in her voice was complete. She had publicly cut them off. Without another look at their stunned, horrified faces, Camila closed the gap between herself and Arya. The crowd stared, completely spellbound, as the camp's heartthrob reached out and gently took Arya's shaking, freezing hand. Come on, Camila murmured, her voice now soft, meant only for Arya. Let's get out of here. And in a silence so total you could hear the fluorescent lights hum, Camila, holding Arya's diary in one hand and Arya's hand in the other, led her from the cafeteria, leaving a shocked and utterly changed world behind them. Part 3. Oxygen and Mannequins. The walk from the cafeteria blurred into sensory overload and unreal quiet. Arya was aware of the steady warmth of Camilla's hand wrapped firmly around her own, a stark counterpoint to the cold tremor that still rattled through her bones. She noticed the stares that tracked them like heat-seeking missiles, the whispers that hissed in their wake like steam. Mostly, though, she noticed Camilla, her purposeful stride, the set of her shoulders, the unreadable line of her profile. Camilla didn't stop until she pushed open the door to a small, empty art history classroom, its walls lined with faded posters of Renaissance masterpieces. The door clicked shut, and the racket of the outside world thinned to a distant murmur. The sudden quiet was thunderous. Sunlight poured through the broad windows, catching the dance of dust motes in the air. Camilla finally let go of Arya's hand, and Arya instantly folded her arms around herself. Feeling exposed and raw, she couldn't meet her eyes. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving a hard, cold embarrassment. The words from her diary seemed to ring in the silent room, each one a new brand of humiliation. "You?" Arya's voice came out a ragged whisper, hoarse from swallowed sobs. She stared fixedly at a diagram of the Parthenon on the whiteboard. "You don't have to do this. You can go." Camilla, who had been setting the rescued diary gently on a desk, paused and turned. "Do what?" "This." Arya gestured weakly between them, finally risking a glance. "Stay with me. You just felt sorry for me back there. You were being kind. I get it. And I'm so sorry for what they did, for what you had to hear. It's so pathetic." The last word was a breath of self-loathing. Camilla's expression, which had been intent and severe, softened. A small, almost invisible smile touched her mouth. She took a step closer, then another, until she was standing right in front of Arya, well inside the bubble of personal space Arya usually guarded so fiercely. "Arya," Camilla said, her voice low and incredibly gentle, "look at me." It took every ounce of courage Arya owned to lift her gaze. Camilla's eyes were no longer blazing with anger. They were a calm, deep ocean blue, fixed on her with a focus that made Arya's breath hitch. "Do I look like I'm being kind?" Camilla asked, head tilted. Arya could only shake her head in silence. No, she looked sincere. "I'm not here out of pity," Camilla said, her voice leaving no room for debate. "I'm here because for months I've been watching the quiet, brilliant girl in the back of Philosophy 101, who writes notes like she's composing symphonies and who sees the world like she understands a secret the rest of us are missing." Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt it, like thunder under skin, a truth arriving, one she had never dared to hope for. She'd noticed. "I'm here," Camilla continued, a playful, knowing smirk finally gracing her features, "because I just found out that same girl thinks I'm her." What was the phrase? She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes sparkling. Right? Her oxygen. A sound halfway between a groan and a sob escaped Arya's lips. She buried her face in her hands, her entire body flushing with a fresh wave of heat. "Oh God, please don't." Camilla's laughter was soft, a warm, melodic sound that filled the quiet room. It wasn't mocking. It was delighted. And that everyone else is just a mannequin. She was teasing her, but the teasing was laced with unmistakable awe. "Arya, that's the most romantic thing anyone has ever thought about me, let alone written down." Arya peeked through her fingers. "You're not freaked out." "Freaked out," Camilla repeated, her smile widening. She reached out, her fingers gently encircling Arya's wrists, coaxing her hands away from her face. Her touch was electric. "I've been waiting my whole life for someone to see me as more than a shiny accessory, to see something real. And you see straight through to the core of me with those big, beautiful, brainy eyes. It's terrifying and incredible." She was so close now. Arya could see the faint dusting of freckles across her nose, the slight smudge of eyeliner under her eyes, the soft pink of her lips. The world had shrunk to this sunlit classroom. to the space between their bodies. So, no, Camila whispered, her voice dropping to an intimate murmur that vibrated through Arya's entire being. I don't want to go anywhere. In fact, the only place I want to be is right here. Her gaze flicked down to Arya's lips, then back, up to her eyes, a question held within them. The air grew thick, charged with a potential so immense it was dizzying. You wrote that if I ever looked at you, you'd forget how to breathe, Camila murmured, her breath a warm caress against Arya's skin. She leaned in, closing the final infinitesimal distance between them. So, can I ask, do you want some of your oxygen back? The line was impossibly cheesy. It was the kind of thing Arya would have rolled her eyes at in a movie. But here, now spoken in Camilla's hushed, sincere tone, it was the most perfect, heart-stoppingly romantic thing she had ever heard. Arya's answer was a barely perceptible nod, a tiny, desperate movement. That was all the permission Camila needed. She closed her eyes and pressed her lips to Arya's. It wasn't a dramatic move, a perfect kiss. It was soft, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. It was the gentle sealing of a promise made in front of a cafeteria full of people. Arya's mind, usually a whirlwind of analysis and thought, went utterly, blissfully silent. There was no diary, no humiliation, no crowd. There was only the soft pressure of Camilla's mouth, the faint scent of her vanilla shampoo, and the overwhelming whirling sensation of a dream not just coming true, but surpassing itself. When Camila pulled back just a fraction, Arya's eyes were still closed. She swayed on her feet, her legs having turned to liquid. A soft dazed "oh" escaped her lips. Camilla's smirk was back, but it was fond now. Whoa there, she chuckled, her arms sliding securely around Arya's waist to steady her. I knew I was a good kisser, but I've never actually made someone faint. I'm not fainting. Arya breathed, though the room was doing a slow, pleasant tilt around her. She leaned heavily into Camilla's support, her head finding a perfect resting place against Camilla's shoulder. I'm just recalibrating. Camila held her close, laughing softly into her hair. Recalibrating. I like that. She held her for a long moment, letting the new fragile reality settle around them. Then, with a tenderness that made Arya's heart ache, she whispered, come on, let's get you somewhere you can recalibrate. Lying down, in one smooth, effortless motion, Camila bent and slipped one arm under Arya's knees, the other round her back, and lifted her. It was a bridal carry, straight out of the fantasies Arya would never have dared to write down. Arya, too overwhelmed to protest, simply looped her arms around Camilla's neck and buried her face there, inhaling the scent that was now irrevocably hers. Camila carried her out of the classroom, down the mercifully empty hallways and into the sanctity of her dorm room. She laid Arya down on the soft comforter as if she was something precious and rare. They didn't speak. They simply curled into one another, a tangle of limbs and relief and dawning wonder, still in their jeans and sweaters. Camilla's fingers traced gentle patterns on Arya's back until her breathing evened out, and the last of the tremors subsided. Pressed against Camila, listening to the steady beat of her heart, Arya felt something she hadn't felt in years, perhaps ever, a profound and absolute sense of safety. And as she drifted into an exhausted, blissful sleep, she knew one thing for certain. The girl who wrote about oxygen had finally learned how to breathe. Part 4. New Rhythms. The morning after the cafeteria incident dawned not with awkwardness, but with a quiet seismic shift. Waking up in Camilla's bed, tangled in her sheets and her arms, was a reality so vastly different from fantasy that Arya's first conscious thought was that she must still be dreaming. Camilla's blonde hair was spilled across the pillow, her face soft and peaceful in sleep. The morning light painted her in gold, and Arya, for a long, breathless moment, just watched her, memorizing the details, the faint line of a pillow crease on her cheek, the gentle part of her lips. Then blue eyes fluttered open. There was a second of disorientation, then a slow, drowsy smile that could have powered the entire campus. "Morning," Camila whispered, her voice husky with sleep. "Morning," Arya whispered back, her heart performing a clumsy, joyful somersault. That first day set the template for new reality. It was a day of quiet, profound discoveries, a mutual unveiling that was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Their first walk to class together was an event. Arya, who usually navigated the paths with her head down and her books clutched to her chest like a shield, now walked with her hands securely enveloped in Camilla's. The stares were different now, less mocking, more curious, some even tinged with envy. Camila, for her part, didn't just tolerate the attention. She seemed utterly oblivious to it. Her focus was entirely on Arya, her thumb drawing absent, soothing circles on the back of Arya's hand. "So," Camila said, swinging their joined hands lightly between them. "Philosophy 101. You're going to have to help me. I think I spent most of that class doodling in my notebook." Arya blinked. "You doodled, but you always looked so engaged." "A convincing facade," Camila confessed with a self-deprecating grin. "I was mostly drawing album covers." "And you?" She nudged Arya's shoulder with her own. "You were writing novels in the margins. I saw you." "What were you writing?" Arya felt a blush creep up her neck. Analysis of the analysis. "Sometimes I'd get bored and write little stories about the people in the paintings on the slides." Camila stopped walking, her face alight with delight. "You are the cutest person I have ever met. You have to show me sometime." This became their new rhythm. Shared lunches were no longer a solitary affair for Arya or a loud social event for Camila. They claimed a small table by the window, and their trays became a neutral ground for cultural exchange. Camila learned about Arya's goofy hidden side, her secret prolific activity on Wattpad where she wrote elaborate fanfiction under pseudonym. "Wait, you mean people actually read the stories you write?" Camila asked, her eyes wide as she stole a carrot from Arya's plate. "Some of them," Arya admitted, hiding behind her water bottle. "My enemies to love a space opera has a small but dedicated following." Camila nearly choked on her carrot, laughing. "I need the username right now." "That is non-negotiable." In turn, Arya learned that the seemingly flawless Camila was at heart a hopeless romantic with a melancholic streak. Her dorm room, which Arya had assumed would be a shrine to parties and popularity, was instead dotted with evidence of a softer soul. A beloved Taylor Swift vinyl set hung framed on the wall, and she could and did launch into a spirited, meticulous breakdown of the storytelling in folklore, and evermore. "It's the ache," Camila said, her voice turning earnest as they studied on her floor later that day. "It's about the one who slipped away, or the one you never truly had but built a whole imaginary universe around. I don't know. It's true." Arya looked at her, this radiant girl who understood the architecture of longing, and felt a connection so strong it made her lightheaded. "I know exactly what you mean." The physical comfort between them deepened with every hour. Camila was naturally tactile, and now she had permission. A hand at the small of Arya's back guiding her through a doorway, an arm draped easily over her shoulders as they walked. Her fingers would wander to the ends of Arya's dark hair and the kisses. Those became a new lexicon, frequent and fervent. Camila seemed to chase them, stealing them whenever she could. A quick, gentle press to Arya's temple when she cracked a tough problem, a slower, lingering kiss at Arya's dorm door before they reluctantly parted for the night. Each one left, Arya floating, her thoughts sweetly scattered, a grin threatening to take over her face. She was mapping the contours of Camilla's affection. She learned that Camilla's public kisses were tender and affirming a statement, but the private ones, when it was just the two of them in her room or tucked away in a silent common area, felt different, unhurried, searching, exploratory, carrying a warmth that promised this was only the beginning. By the end of that first, life-altering day, their world had shifted entirely. Arya, the girl who used to disappear into books, now crossed campus with the sun on her face, and the campus heartthrob's hand in hers, discovering that the real Camila was far more captivating than the idealized version she'd penned. And Camila, the girl perpetually single, finally felt the first solid footings of the lasting love she'd always believed in, finding it in the most unlikely and perfect place. Part 5. Banter and Sparks. Their new bond didn't just bloom. It unfolded, layer by careful layer, through a constant, delightful exchange of words. Their relationship turned into a private dialected dance of warmth and wit, where every tease was a secret caress and every comeback a promise of understanding. It often played out during study marathons, their books and notes spread between them like a neutral territory they ruled together. Camila would glance over at Arya's impeccably organized notes, a beautiful chaos of color-coded highlights, crisp diagrams, and margin comments tucked into every spare inch. "You know," Camila would say, a familiar, playful curve to her mouth. "Archaeologists could use your notes. They read like ancient runes. This part here," she tapped a particularly dense page, "is obviously a map to a lost city. And this footnote? Pretty sure it's the recipe for the Philosopher's Stone." Arya didn't lift her eyes from the text, but a small smile tugged at her lips. "And your notes," she replied smoothly, "look like they were scribbled by a rooster that just discovered espresso. Key term, giant question mark, and then what I can only assume is a doodle of a very disappointed cloud." Camila gasped in mock offense. "That cloud has existential dread. It's relevant to the module on Schopenhauer. It's crying, Camila. It's a crying cloud. It's a metaphor," Camila insisted, laughing. She reached out and poked Arya's arm. "You're just jealous of my abstract expressionist note-taking technique. I'm jealous of the professor who has to grade it," Arya quipped back, finally looking up, her eyes sparkling behind her glasses. The thrill of their easy back and forth was a constant, pleasant buzz under her skin. Camilla's charm often manifested in what Arya lovingly dubbed the cheesy one-liner offensive. She deployed them with the confidence of a movie hero, and Arya, much to her own surprise, had developed a rapid response system. They were walking through the autumn crisp quad, shoulders brushing, when a strong gust of wind sent a cascade of golden leaves swirling around them. Camila stopped, caught one, and presented it to Arya with a flourish. "I think the wind is jealous." Arya took the leaf, raising a single, unimpressed eyebrow. "Jealous of what?" "Of how often it gets to touch you," Camila said, her voice dropping into that low, intentionally smooth register. Arya fought to keep her face stern. "That's the worst one yet. Truly, I'm deducting points." "You love it," Camila sang, looping her arm through Arya's and pulling her close. "I tolerate it," Arya corrected, but she was pressing into Camilla's side, her protest utterly void of conviction. "Because I feel sorry for you. It must be hard having a brain that produces such spectacularly bad dialogue." "It's a gift and a curse," Camila sighed dramatically. But their banter was the surface current. Beneath it ran a deep, steady river of shared dreams. Nights spent talking in Camilla's dorm, curled up on her bed, were when the masks fully came off. The humor softened into vulnerability, the teasing into tenderness. "What do you want?" Camila asked one night, her head pillowed on Arya's stomach, looking up at her. "I mean, really want after all this?" Her gesture encompassed the university, the degree paths, the expected trajectories. Arya didn't even have to think. Her fingers carted gently through Camilla's soft hair. "To write. To create worlds that feel as real as this one does right now. To make people feel the way my favorite authors made me feel. Less alone." Camilla's expression was one of utter captivation. "You will. I'll be your first and biggest fan. I'll buy 10 copies of your book and force everyone I know to read it." Arya laughed softly. "What about you? What does the famous Camila want? Beyond the obvious true love?" Camila was quiet for a moment, her gaze turning inward. I want a home, she said, her voice quieter, more serious than Arya had ever heard it. Not a house. A home. The kind you build with someone, where you have inside jokes and know how they take their coffee, and you can be silent together. And it's not awkward. I want to grow old with my person. I want to be someone's endgame, she blushed slightly, referencing the Taylor Swift lyric. It sounds stupid. It doesn't, Arya whispered, her heart aching with a sweet, fierce protectiveness. It sounds perfect. In these moments, the playful tug-of-war of nerdiness versus charm fell away, revealing the truth. They were the same. They were both dreamers and believers, one expressing it through intricate stories, the other through an unwavering faith in romance itself. But the physical tension, the simmering desire their banter often danced around, was always present. It was in the way Camilla's gaze would drop to Arya's lips mid-sentence, halting her witty retort. It was in the way Arya's breath would catch, when Camilla's fingers would accidentally brush against the bare skin of her wrist, while reaching for a book. The banter was the spark, and the looks that followed were the kindling. They were building something magnificent together, word by word, laugh by laugh, and the unspoken agreement hung in the air between them. The foundation was almost complete, and soon, very soon, they would set the whole thing ablaze. Part 6. The Library Incident. The library during finals week was a sacred silent space, a cavern of concentrated stress and caffeine-fueled focus. The air hummed with the silent intensity of 100 minds, working at their absolute limit. For Arya, it was a familiar habitat. She was in her element, surrounded by the smell of old paper and the soft rustle of pages. A fortress of textbooks and her own meticulously organized notes built around her like a bunker. Camilla, by contrast, was a beautiful, restless anomaly in the serene landscape. She'd been trying to focus on a dense political science text for nearly an hour, her brow furrowed in concentration, but her leg bounced incessantly under the table. Her presence was a constant, low-level distraction to Arya. Not an unwelcome one, but a potent one nonetheless. Every sigh, every shift in her chair, every time she tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, Arya's focus would waver for a fraction of a second. They were the only two people in their particular aisle, a narrow canyon of bookshelves dedicated to obscure literary criticism. The silence was so profound, it felt like a physical presence. Arya was deep in a complex analysis of post-colonial theory, her pen flying across a note card when she felt it. Camilla's gaze. It wasn't a casual look. It was a weight, a heat. Arya tried to ignore it, to anchor herself in the words on the page, but her skin prickled with awareness. She could feel Camilla's eyes tracing the line of her profile, lingering on her mouth, drifting down to where her hand gripped the pen. A slow, deliberate scrape of a chair broke the silence. Arya kept her eyes glued to her note card, her heart beginning to thump a little harder. She heard Camilla stand up. She didn't walk away. She just stood there for a moment, and Arya could feel her looking down at her. Then the sound of something clattering to the floor. A pen. It rolled, coming to a stop right next to Arya's foot under the table. Oh, Arya thought. A simple, innocent observation. She dropped her pen. The logical, expected thing would be for Camilla to bend down, quickly retrieve it, and sit back up. But logic had left the building the moment Camilla had decided to target her. Arya watched, frozen, as Camilla slowly, so slowly, sank into a crouch beside her chair. She didn't look at Arya. Her eyes were fixed on the pen. But the air changed. The academic tension of the library was violently supplanted by a new terrifying electric charge. Time seemed to stretch and warp. Camilla's hand didn't go for the pen. Not immediately. Instead, she stayed crouched, her face level with Arya's knee. Arya could feel the warmth of her body, could smell the faint, intoxicating scent of her perfume. Her breath hitched, a tiny, audible sound in the crushing silence. Then Camilla moved. She didn't pick up the pen. She placed one hand gently on Arya's ankle, acclaiming, steadying touch that sent a jolt straight up Arya's spine, holding Arya's gaze with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. Camilla leaned forward and pressed her lips to the bare skin of Arya's calf, just above her sock. Arya's entire world narrowed to that single point of contact. Her pen slipped from her nerveless fingers. Her lips parted in a soundless gasp. Camilla's kiss was soft, deliberate, and devastating. It was a brand, and she didn't stop. Still holding Arya's ankle, her lips began a languid, tortuous trail upward. A kiss on the delicate curve of her calf muscle, another just below her knee. Each press of her lips was a silent, scandalous question. Each one was answered by a fresh wave of heat flooding Arya's veins, her face burning with a blush so fierce she felt lightheaded. This was insane. They were in the library. Anyone could walk down this aisle. The risk was astronomical, the audacity breathtaking. Camilla's lips ghosted over the sensitive skin of her inner thigh just above her knee, and a full body shudder racked Arya. A small involuntary gasp finally escaped her, a desperate puff of air that sounded obscenely loud in the quiet. That was the breaking point, the last shred of Arya's restraint, her shyness. Her carefully constructed control vaporized. It was replaced by a raw, primal need that roared to life inside her. This wasn't playful teasing anymore. This was a declaration, and Arya was done being a passive recipient. She moved suddenly, decisively. Her hand shot out, not to push Camilla away, but to plunge into the golden silk of her hair. Her grip wasn't gentle. It was possessive, urgent. She tugged, not hard, but with enough force to pull Camilla up from her crouch. Camilla rose, her eyes wide with surprise, her lips slightly parted. There was a flicker of uncertainty in her blue eyes. Had she gone too far? Arya answered by surging forward from her chair, crashing her lips against Camilla's. It wasn't like their previous kisses. Soft, exploring, sweet. This was pure, unadulterated passion. A pent-up inferno finally unleashed. It was messy and desperate. All clashing teeth and shared ragged breaths. Arya poured every ounce of her shock, her desire, her weeks of aching longing into that kiss. She felt Camilla's initial surprise melt away in an instant, replaced by a hunger that matched her own. Camilla's hands came up to frame Arya's face, holding her there as if she might vanish. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing, as if they'd just run a marathon. Their foreheads rested together, eyes closed. The air around them crackled. "We can't hear," Arya breathed, her voice trembling with the force of the emotion coursing through her. Camilla's response was a low, guttural sound of agreement. In one fluid motion, she grabbed Arya's hand and her own backpack, abandoning their scattered books and notes on the table. The world outside their bubble, the library, finals, everything ceased to exist. She nearly dragged Arya out of the aisle, down the stairs, and through the main library doors. They burst out into the cool evening air, but it did nothing to douse the fire. They didn't speak. They just ran hand in hand, a single entity of shared, desperate purpose, fleeing the scene of the crime and racing toward the only possible conclusion. Part 7. First Night of Passion. The door to Camilla's dorm room slammed shut behind them, the sound echoing like a starting pistol in the tense silence of the hallway. Inside, the world shrunk to the four walls of this dimly lit sanctuary, charged with the frantic energy of their flight from the library. The only light came from a single desk lamp, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to pulse in time with their ragged breaths. They stood for a moment, chests heaving, still clutching each other's hands as if for anchor. The bravado and desperate passion that had propelled them out of the library now gave way to a trembling, breathless anticipation. The air was thick with the unspoken magnitude of what was about to happen. Camilla was the first to move. She brought Arya's captured hand to her lips, pressing a soft, reverent kiss to her knuckles, her eyes never leaving Arya's. In that gaze, Arya saw the same fierce protectiveness from the cafeteria now mixed with a raw, undisguised hunger that made her knees weak. "Are you sure?" Camila whispered, her voice husky, the words a soft cloud in the tiny space between them. It was a final offer of an escape hatch, a testament to the care that lay underneath the desire. Arya's answer was not in words. She reached up with her free hand, her fingers trembling only slightly as she carefully slid the glasses from her own face and placed them on the desk beside them. The world went softly blurry, reducing Camila to a beautiful golden-haired impressionist painting. It made everything feel more like a dream, more intimate. Then she leaned in and captured Camilla's lips in a kiss that was her answer, her surrender, and her beginning all at once. It was all the permission Camila needed. The kiss deepened from tentative to consuming. This was not like the library. There were no constraints here, no fear of discovery. Hands that had been clinging now began to explore. Camilla's fingers slid into Arya's dark hair, tilting her head to deepen the angle of the kiss, while Arya's hands fisted in the soft fabric of Camilla's sweatshirt, pulling her closer until not a sliver of light could pass between them. With a mutual unspoken urgency, they began to undress each other. It was not a graceful, cinematic strip. It was a fumbling, breathless, beautiful mess of trembling hands and soft, nervous laughter. Buttons were misaligned, zippers stuck. Camila, her hand shaking, pushed the oversized sweater from Arya's shoulders, her breath catching as it pulled on the floor. Arya, emboldened by the awe in Camilla's eyes, worked the hem of Camilla's shirt up and over her head, revealing toned skin that gleamed in the lamplight. Each new inch of exposed skin was a revelation, a silent vow. When they stood before each other at last, stripped down to their most vulnerable selves, the frantic energy stilled. Camilla's eyes drank her in, not with lust, but with something far more profound. Reverence. "God, Arya," she breathed, her voice full of wonder. "You're so beautiful." The words so sincere, so Eric, shattered the last of Arya's insecurities. She had always felt ordinary, bookish, pale next to Camilla's sun-kissed brilliance. But in Camilla's eyes, she saw herself reflected as a masterpiece. Camila led her gently to the bed, laying her down upon the comforter as if she was something fragile and precious. Then she began her worship. Her kisses were a slow, meticulous photography of devotion. She started at Arya's lips, then trailed down her jawline to the frantic pulse at the base of her throat. She mapped the delicate curve of her collarbone, the gentle swell of her breasts, the quivering plane of her stomach. Every kiss, every whisper of her lips and brush of her tongue was a silent promise, a sentence in a new language they were creating together. Arya was lost in a haze of sensation. Her eyes fluttered shut, her head falling back against the pillows as a soft, broken moan escaped her lips. She had never felt so seen, so known, so utterly cherished. This was nothing like the clumsy, rushed encounters she'd read about or nervously imagined. This was fire and tenderness intertwined. This was the all-consuming love she had only ever dared to dream of in the deepest, most secret parts of her diary. "Camila," she gasped, her voice as strangest to her own ears, thick with pleasure and emotion. Hearing her name spoken like that seemed to undo Camila completely. Her careful control slipped, giving way to a deeper, more urgent need. Their bodies aligned, skin against skin, and the world narrowed to the space of the single bed. When they finally came together, it was with a shared gasp that was part pain, part relief, part homecoming. It was the final barrier dissolving. "I can't rewrite explicit sexual content. However, I can give you a PG-13, fade to black, rewrite that keeps the flow, tone, and vocabulary level while removing graphic details. Here it is, the final page of a long, aching story turned to reveal the first chapter of something new." Arya gasped, her fingers curling into Camilla's back knot, to push her away, but to anchor herself to this moment, to this feeling that felt too vast to hold. Camila moved with a sure, careful rhythm, at once confident and searching. Her gaze stayed on Arya, reading every flicker of joy, every whisper of doubt. She breathed Arya's name like a prayer. Again and again, each breath threaded with quiet promises Arya felt to her core. The ascent was slow and exquisite, a coil of feeling wound from weeks of stolen glances, tender banter, and breathless kisses. It gathered in Arya's chest, bright and taut, until it crested, overwhelming and complete. She broke with a cry muffled against Camilla's shoulder, every nervelet, her whole body trembling with a happiness she hadn't known was possible. Camilla soon folded into the same quiet, shaking relief, her own release a wordless collapse. Against Arya, her name a final, breathless sigh on Arya's lips. For a long while there was only the hush of their slowing heartbeats, and uneven breaths mixing in the still air. They were warm, spent, tangled together. Camilla shifted just enough to see her, brushing damp strands from Arya's forehead. Her eyes were soft, sated, and so full of love that Arya's throat tightened. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence said everything. Later, after they cleaned up and returned to bed, they found each other again, slower, sweeter, a gentle rediscovery of the ground they had just claimed. And then, once more in the deep, quiet hours, a drowsy tenderness born of the simple joy of reaching out and finding the other there. When true exhaustion finally settled over them, they fell asleep wrapped around each other, a comfortable tangle of limbs. Arya's head rested on Camilla's chest, the steady beat beneath her ear lulling her to sleep. As she drifted, one clear thought rose through the haze. Her diary had been a book of dreams, but this, the weight of Camilla's arm, the shared warmth of their skin, the echo of her name in the dark, this was the real story, and it was infinitely better. Part 8. Obsession and Tenderness. The morning after their first night together was not a return to the old routine, but the discovery of a brighter one. Waking was slow, luxurious, and full of rediscovery. Limbs remained entwined, skin to warm skin, and the room seemed permanently altered, carrying the intimate scent of closeness. There was no awkwardness, only a dazed, quiet wonder. A glance across the pillow led to a soft, unhurried kiss, which led to lazy, exploring hands, which led to another sunlit closeness, less frantic than the night before, but deeper, more assured. They were learning each other's bodies like a favorite new language. That new intimacy blossomed into a delicious, all-consuming preoccupation. A switch felt flipped, releasing a rush of feeling that refused to be ignored. They became masters of the stolen moment, artists of the secret touch. In their poetry seminar, perched at small individual desks, Camilla's foot would hook lightly around Arya's ankle, a steady, warming pressure lasting through the professor's lecture on sonnets. Under the desk, her hand would find Arya's knee, her thumb tracing slow, teasing circles until Arya's notes dissolved into illegible squiggles. During a study session in a deserted common room, Arya would be reading aloud from a textbook when she'd feel Camilla's lips brush against the sensitive skin behind her ear, followed by a soft nip on her lobe. Arya would shiver, her voice faltering. "Cam, we're in public," she'd whisper, even as she tilted her head to grant better access. "There's no one here," Camilla would murmur against her neck, her breath a hot caress. "And even if there were, I don't think I could stop." The library, the site of their initial undoing, became their illicit playground. They'd seek out the most remote, dusty aisles, the ones housing archives no one ever visited, behind a bookshelf crammed with volumes of forgotten criticism. Camilla would press Arya against the stacks and kiss her until they were both breathless and dizzy. The risk of being discovered added a thrilling voltage to every touch. But the most profound change was in Arya. The shy, flustered girl who used to blush at a simple smile began to bloom with a new, quiet confidence. The power Camilla's touch held over her was a language. She was learning to speak herself. She discovered she could reduce the ever-composed Camilla to a stuttering, flustered mess with just a well-placed touch or a whispered word. One afternoon, as Camila was animatedly explaining the narrative structure of a Taylor Swift album. Arya simply reached out and tucked a stray strand of blonde hair behind her ear, letting her fingers linger on the delicate shell of it. Camila lost her train of thought entirely, her mouth hanging slightly open. "What was that?" Arya asked, her voice laced with innocent amusement. "Something about a mad woman?" Camila just stared at her, her cheeks pink. "You're playing with fire, Lewis's." "I know," Arya replied, a slow, sliced smile spreading across her face. It was a newfound power, and she reveled in it. This physical obsession, however, was merely the surface expression of a much deeper connection being forged in the quiet moments. At night, tangled in Camila's sheets, the urgency would fade, replaced by a vulnerable, tender honesty. The darkness gave them courage to share the parts of themselves they kept hidden from the world. It was Arya who spoke first, her head on Camila's chest, listening to the steady thump of her heart. Sometimes, she whispered into the silence, "I'm afraid you'll wake up and realize this is all a mistake." Camila's hand, which had been tracing patterns on her back, stilled a mistake. "What are you talking about? That you'll see I'm just ordinary. That I'm not like the people you usually have in your orbit. I'm just a nerdy girl with too many books and weird facts clogging up my brain. I don't know how to be glamorous or cool." The insecurities long buried spilled out in a soft rush. Camila was quiet for a long moment. Then she shifted, rolling onto her side to face Arya, cupping her face in her hands. Her expression was deadly serious in the moonlight filtering through the blinds. "Arya," she said, her voice firm, "listen to me. Those people, the orbit, they were the mannequins, beautiful, empty, and interchangeable. You," her thumb stroked Arya's cheekbone, "you are the most real, the most fascinating, the most brilliant person I have ever met. Your brain is the sexiest thing about you, and that's saying something because everything about you is sexy. I don't want cool. I want you. I want the girl who mutters to herself in Latin when she's concentrating. I want the girl who knows everything about fictional worlds and nothing about pop culture. You are my dream, not my mistake." Tears welled in Arya's eyes, but they were tears of relief of a weight being lifted. Emboldened by Arya's vulnerability, Camila shared her own fear later that same night. "People see the hair, the face," she murmured, her voice small. "They see a pretty accessory. They want to be seen with me, or they want to conquer me, but they never really see me. I was always so afraid that no one would ever love the person behind all this." She gestured vaguely at her own stunning features as if they were a costume. "That I'd just be someone's trophy, or their fun story, never there forever." Arya understood then that Camila's belief in true love wasn't just a romantic ideal. It was an armor against a deep-seated fear of being loved for the wrong reasons. She leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was a promise. "I see you," she whispered, against her lips, "and I'm not going anywhere." Their relationship became a perfect, powerful alloy. The obsessive spark-filled physical pull that left them breathless in library stacks, fused with a profound, tender trust they built in the safety of the dark. They were in every sense consuming each other, and in doing so were building something unshakable from the inside out. Part 9. Public and Private Love. Their romance became the campus equivalent of a solar eclipse, a rare dazzling event that no one could look away from. It was impossible to hide, and soon they stopped trying. The stolen glances and hidden handholds evolved into something bold, defiant, and beautifully unapologetic. The epicenter of the gossip mill was, of course, the cafeteria. But now, instead of sitting alone, Arya sat with Camila's arm draped casually over the back of her chair. Instead of hiding behind books, she was often caught mid-laugh, her head thrown back, as Camila told some animated story, her eyes fixed only on Arya. They shared food off each other's plates without a second thought. A simple intimacy that spoke louder than any grand gesture. The rumors swirled with the ferocity of an autumn gale. In the locker rooms, on frat house couches, in dorm rooms late at night. The same questions were whispered. Is it real? How long do you give it? A week? A month? What does Camila even see in her? It's just a phase, a rebellion. They were spotted everywhere, pressed against the lockers between classes, sharing a slow, deep kiss that made the hallway traffic jam around them, walking hand in hand across the quad, their linked hands swinging between them. Camilla's head bent low to hear something Aria was saying, both of them laughing. To the student body, it was a spectacle. To Aria and Camila, it was just their life. Camila, for her part, became a lioness. She didn't just ignore the whispers. She actively challenged them. She'd walk into a room and feel the conversation hitch, see the sit-along glances. Once a guy from her policy class, a friend of Troy's, muttered brainy and bimbo under his breath to his friend as they passed, followed by a snicker. Camila stopped dead. She turned slowly, her expression icy calm. Got something to say, Tyler? She asked, her voice cutting through the hallway noise. The guy flushed, stammering a denial. Camila took a step forward, not threateningly, but with an unwavering confidence that commanded attention. I choose brainy over bitter any day. And just so we're clear, she said, her voice rising so others could hear, if you have a problem with who I love, you have a problem with me. And I'd rethink that. She didn't wait for a response. She simply turned, took Aria's hand again, and walked away, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. She never heard another word from him. These public displays of protection were a balm to Aria's old insecurities. But the true transformation happened in private, within the sacred space of Camilla's dorm room or during their late-night walks. Around the deserted campus, the physical intimacy they discovered continued to deepen, becoming a language of its own. Aria's initial shyness melted away, replaced by a burgeoning confidence that surprised even her. One evening, as Camila was studying at her desk, Aria came up behind her, wrapped her arms around her shoulders, and pressed a soft kiss to the pulse point on her neck. Camila hummed in contentment, leaning back into the touch. Then Aria's lips traveled to her ear. You've been staring at that page for 10 minutes, she whispered, her voice a low, playful murmur. Need a distraction. The tone, the confidence in it was new. Camila shivered, her pen dropping from her hand. Aria Lewis, she breathed, turning in her chair to face her, her eyes dark with sudden desire. Are you teasing me? Is it working? Aria asked, a slight smile on her lips before she leaned down and captured Camilla's mouth in a kiss that was all slow, deliberate passion. This newfound assertiveness bled into their everyday dynamic. Aria started initiating kisses hello and goodbye. She'd pull Camila into an empty classroom for a frantic 2-minute makeout session, leaving them both breathless and grinning. She discovered the power of a well-timed lingering touch on Camila's waist, of whispering a risque comment in her ear during a boring lecture just to watch her squirm. In turn, Camila revealed a softer, needier side in private. She loved to simply hold Aria, to rest her head in her lap while Aria read aloud, to have Aria play with her hair. Tell me a story, she'd mumble, her eyes closed. One of yours. And Aria would, weaving tales of fantasy and adventure, her voice soft and low until Camila fell asleep against her. Their love became a perfect self-sustaining ecosystem. The public scrutiny only drove them closer, reinforcing their us-against-the-world bond. Camilla's proud, fierce defense gave Aria the safety to bloom, and Aria's quiet, growing strength gave Camila the vulnerable, real connection she'd always craved. The world outside might see the nerdy brunette and the blonde heartthrob, a bizarre mismatch. But in the quiet of their togetherness, they knew the truth. They were the scholar and the romantic, the witty introvert and the charming protector, two halves of a whole that finally made sense. They weren't just dating. They were building a fortress. And every shared laugh, every challenged critic, every tender touch was another brick firmly laid in place. Part 10. Soulmates in the Making. The soft gray light of a rainy evening filtered through Camilla's window, painting the room in shades of silver and deep blue. They lay entwined on Camilla's bed, a comfortable knot of limbs, having long since traded their textbooks for the superior ease of each other's arms. The only sounds were the soft drum of rain on the window and the slow, synchronized cadence of their breathing. Aria's head rested on Camilla's chest, rising and falling with each inhale. She traced lazy, aimless shapes across the bare skin of Camilla's stomach, feeling the faint pull of muscles under her fingertips. Camilla's hand was buried in Aria's dark hair, idly combing through the strands, her touch impossibly gentle. In that quiet, unguarded lull, Camilla broke the peaceful hush, her voice a low vibration beneath Aria's ear. "You know," she began, thoughtful, almost reverent. "In high school land, even here, people kept asking why I never settled, why I was always waiting. They made it sound like a flaw, like I was too picky." Aria's fingers went still, listening closely. She knew this mattered. Camilla's hand paused in her hair. "I tried to explain. I said I was waiting for the click. Not just attraction, or fun, or even liking someone. It was a feeling like a key sliding into a lock you didn't know existed. A sense of, oh, there you are. I've been looking for you." She shifted slightly and pressed a kiss to the top of Aria's head. "I was starting to think I'd imagined it, that the click was just something from songs and stories, that it didn't happen in real life." Aria lifted her head then, propping her chin on Camilla's chest to meet her gaze. In the dim light, Camilla's features looked softened, her eyes earnest and bright with unshed tears. And then Camilla whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of it, "I heard your words in that cafeteria. My friends were laughing, but all I heard was the click. It was the loudest, most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. It was you. It was always going to be you." She cupped Aria's face, her thumb stroking her cheek. "You're my soulmate, Aria. Not in some fated, written in the stars way, but in the way that feels like coming home. You're the one I was waiting for." Tears gathered in Aria's eyes, spilling warm across her temples and into her hairline. The confession was so raw, so perfectly spoken. It felt like Camilla had reached into her chest and given voice to the deepest, most secret hope of her own heart. I used to write about you," Aria admitted, her voice thick with tears. "In my diary I'd build these elaborate daydreams, little scenes where you'd notice me, where you'd smile at me or say my name. They were fantasies, my quiet comfort. I never, in a million years, thought." She caught on a sob, a happy, disbelieving laugh tangled in it. "I never thought reality would be so much more." Camilla smiled, her own tears finally breaking free. "Better than your Wattpad stories. So much better." Aria breathed, surging up to kiss her. It tasted of salt and truth and fierce gratitude. When they pulled back, they were both laughing and crying, foreheads pressed together. "What was the best part?" Camilla teased softly, nudging her nose against Aria's. "The library, carrying you to my room, my killer one-liners." Aria laughed, a full, genuine sound that echoed in the quiet room. "No. Well, yes. All of that was spectacular." She grew serious again, her gaze loving. "The best part is the quiet. This right now, waking up with you. The way you bring me coffee exactly how I like it without me ever asking. The way you listen to me ramble about plot holes and actually care. The feeling of your hand in mine when we walk. Not because we're showing off, but because it just fits. The reality of you is infinitely better than the fantasy." They spent the next hour like that, wrapped in each other, talking and dreaming with the easy confidence of those who know they are building a future together. They talked about graduating, about finding an apartment filled with books and records, about adopting a cat with a grumpy face. Aria dreamed aloud about her novels, and Camilla talked about wanting a job that meant something, that helped people, and coming home to the person who meant everything. I don't know what forever looks like, Camila murmured later as the rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. But if it exists, I know it has you in it. It has this. That night, their love-making was different. It wasn't the frantic, passionate fire of the library incident or their first night together. It wasn't the playful, teasing exploration of the following weeks. This was a slow, deep, soulful communion. It was a conversation without words, a reaffirmation of every promise spoken and unspoken. Every touch was a benediction, every sigh, a prayer of gratitude. They moved together with a perfect aching synergy, as if their bodies were just another way for their souls to speak. Afterward, spent and serene, they lay facing each other, legs intertwined, refusing to break contact. Even in sleep, Camila traced the line of Aria's brow, her nose, her lips, as if memorizing her by touch. "My quiet, brilliant girl," she whispered, her eyelids growing heavy. "My oxygen," Aria smiled, the old embarrassment now a fond, private joke between them. She leaned forward and placed one last soft kiss on Camilla's lips. "My true love," she whispered back as sleep finally claimed them. The last thing they each felt was the other's steady breath on their skin. Two women who had once existed in separate worlds, one in the bright, bustling center of everything, the other in the quiet, observant margins, had found in each other a perfect, dazzling whole. The story that had begun with a secret crush written in a diary had found its happy ending, not on a page, but here, in the warm, breathing reality of each other's arms. It wasn't an ending at all. It was the most beautiful beginning. Epilogue, the only chapter that matters. The old campus looked both exactly the same and completely different. The trees were taller. A few new buildings had sprung up, but the air still smelled of cut grass and youthful ambition. For Aria and Camila, walking hand in hand across the quad, it was a walk through a living museum of their own history. Between them, swinging from their linked hands and chattering nonstop, was their 4-year-old daughter, Nora. She was a perfect, beautiful amalgamation of them both. Camilla's sunshine blonde hair fell in waves around her face studded with Aria's faint freckles, and behind a tiny pair of rainbow-colored glasses, she had Camilla's bright blue eyes wide with curiosity. And that's where Mommy C fell in love with Mommy A, Camila said, pointing dramatically toward the library. She did not. Aria laughed, squeezing Camilla's hand. She was too busy doodling album covers in Philosophy 101. "A precursor to my brilliant career in music marketing," Camila retorted with a wink. "And I was multitasking. I was also falling in love with the cute nerd in the back row." Nora, utterly uninterested in the semantics of her mother's courtship, was more focused on a particularly interesting beetle on the path. The college reunion was in full swing in the main hall. It was a sea of slightly older faces, louder laughter, and the familiar, slightly forced energy of people trying to summarize a decade into minute conversations. When Aria and Camila walked in, Nora now perched on Camilla's hip. A hush didn't fall, but a noticeable wave of recognition did. The story of the Cafeteria diary and the campus heartthrob who married the quiet bookworm had passed into legend. They navigated the room, a united front. Aria, once shy and hesitant, now moved with a quiet, grounded confidence. She was a successfully published author, her third novel recently hitting a bestseller list. Camila, no less radiant, had a steadier, more contented glow, her arm a permanent fixture round Aria's waist or holding their daughter. They found themselves near their old crew. Brielle and Naomi, older and wiser, had long ago offered heartfelt apologies, which had been accepted. They cooed over Nora, who buried her face shyly in Camilla's neck. "So, you two really did it," Troy said, now a slightly boring but good-natured accountant. He shook his head with a grin. "Made it. I got to be honest. After the library thing, I gave it a month. Tops." Camila looked at Aria, her expression soft and utterly smitten. So did I, she admitted. I was terrified I'd scared her off for good. Arya leaned into her side. You did, but I decided being scared with you was better than being safe without you. The cheesiness of the line made their friends groan, but the truth in it was undeniable. A decade had only deepened their obsession. As they talked to old classmates, their connection was a constant physical dialogue. Camilla's hand would rest on the small of Arya's back, guiding her. Arya would unconsciously reach up and fix the collar of Camilla's jacket. During a story, Camilla would whisper something in Arya's ear that made her blush and swat her arm. A silent, intimate joke that belonged only to them. Later, as the music started and a few couples drifted to a makeshift dance floor, Camilla put Nora down and knelt before her. Okay, Bug. Mommy A and I are going to dance. You guard the purses like a fierce dragon. Can you do that? Nora nodded seriously, clutching her mother's handbag to her chest with the gravity of a knight accepting a sacred quest. Camilla took Arya's hand and led her into the middle of the room. It wasn't a fast song, but a slow classic love ballad. Camilla pulled Arya close, one hand on her waist, the other holding her hand against her chest right over her heart. Arya's free hand came up to rest on Camilla's shoulder. They didn't sway so much as just hold each other, slowly turning in place in a world of their own. Remember the first time we did this? Camilla murmured, her lips close to Arya's ear. In your dorm room, Arya whispered back, a smile in her voice with no music, just the sound of the radiator hissing. You stepped on my toes. You were leading. I still am, Camilla said, and Arya could hear the smirk in her voice. Arya pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. This woman who was her wife, the mother of her child, her oxygen, you always will be. The love in Camilla's eyes was as fierce and all-consuming as it had been a decade ago. It was the look that had once made Arya feel like she might faint. Now, it just made her feel like she was home. I'm still obsessed with you, you know, Camilla said quietly, the words meant for her alone. I know, Arya replied, her thumb stroking the nape of Camilla's neck. The feeling is still terrifyingly mutual. They were so lost in each other. They didn't notice the small figure until she tugged insistently on both their pants legs. They broke apart and looked down. Nora was holding up Camilla's purse, her job as guardian complete, but her lower lip was trembling. What's wrong, my love? Arya asked, bending down. Nora pointed at them, her big blue eyes welling with tears. You were squishing each other too much. I couldn't get in. The confession was so earnest, so perfectly illustrating her place at the absolute center of their universe that Arya and Camilla melted. Laughing, they parted and scooped her up between them, creating a 3% hug on the dance floor. You're right, Bug. Always room for you, Camilla said, kissing her daughter's cheek. She looked over Nora's head at Arya, her eyes shimmering with happy tears. Our greatest collaboration. Arya smiled, her heart so full she thought it might burst. They began to sway again, a family of 3 now, their little girl nestled contentedly between them. The music swelled around them, but all Arya could hear was the steady beat of Camilla's heart under her hand and the soft, even breathing of their daughter. The diary was a cherished relic in a box somewhere. The rumors were forgotten. The mannequins had all faded away. All that was left was this, a love story that had started with a whisper and had built a world loud enough to last a lifetime.